literally when there's too much energy on the system overloads. You go into fight, flight, freeze, and if there's too much energy, the dorsal vagal kicks in and bam, just takes you out. That's you know, you go offline. And as he was drawing, it's like, oh, it's the same thing in electricity. When like circuits overload, when there's too much energy on a circuit or on a system, it either burns up or trips the breaker, and kind of stuff and it's like, oh, this is like physics. This is why we are reacting, because we are made up of nature and we are these things, so when these energies hit our system, the circuit breaker trips.
Welcome to Shaping the Basin. I'm here with Glenn from Aerie Retreat.
Mhm.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Tell me about you. For anybody who hasn't had the chance to meet you yet, what would you tell them about you?
Well, Gemini, so there's two people inside of me. And yeah, I was an electrical contractor my whole career for almost 40 years. And the Gemini part of me really got into psychology and that kind of work. And so during the time that I was contracting, I was also going out and studying to be a therapist, and worked in trauma therapy and things like that, and kind of fell into it. My ex-wife was a therapist, and I started going to workshops and conferences with her, and from there I just started studying and studied what's called somatic experiencing and Hakomi, which are somatic based modalities, and working with a lot of trauma, a lot of trauma training and information. And during that time, I've always had a dream of owning a retreat center after I retired from contracting. And so, um, I think I might have told the story. I lived in the Bay Area, and a friend of mine was turning 30 years old and had a birthday party. And I was like, I'm not going to go to this 30 something thing. But the last minute I said, no, I should go. I got over there and knew a bunch of people there, but Sharon Melnick was renting a room there because she was going down. That's when she had cancer. She was getting cancer treatments down there. And the two old people in the room connected and started talking. She's a psychologist, worked at Dragonfly here. And I just off the cuff said, yeah, one of these days I've always wanted to own a retreat center. And she's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, I just happen to have one for sale. And that's when you're like, what? And so it was one of those things you kind of look up like, okay. And so that's what brought me up here, is she invited me to come up and take a look at it. And the minute if I get a little emotional, forgive me, because the minute I walked onto the property, it was just like, whoa, like, wow, you get the energy of the place, the beauty of the place, just years and years of like community work and healing work and things like that was going on there. And this, what they did out there. But it took me about a year and a half to finally make the decision, because shortly after that, COVID hit. And it was like, well, how do I own a retreat center if nobody can show up, that kind of thing. And so it kind of put a pause on it. And eventually, came around. I came up several times and brought some men's groups with me and did some workshops just to kind of get a feel for the place and stuff. And it just was magical. And so eventually, finally, told her I was going to buy it. And we go home and run the numbers kind of thing. And about a month went by and she called me kind of with really agitated, like, are you going to buy it? Like, really almost mad at me. Are you going to buy this thing or not? I'm like, whoa. Yeah, I told you I was going to buy it. And I said, are you okay? She goes, no, I'm having to get my affairs in order and things like that. And she literally passed away the next day. And it was like, oh my God. And felt like I lost it because we hadn't gotten into escrow yet. But the person she deeded the property to, one of her best friends, Ann Michaels, called me and just said, she goes, look, I can't do anything with it. She goes, and we all know this place is meant for you. So just get me the numbers and let's get in it. So the next day we were in escrow, so I wasn't going to let it pass by twice. So that's kind of how I got here. And, like I said, what I used to do in the past and stuff. And so, yeah.
I want to let's talk about that piece of property a little bit,
Okay.
where it's at. And then I know you invited me down and I was it definitely has a feeling for, let's talk about that piece of property and what it is and why that's meaningful.
Well, I think my, I think part of like what really hit me was Sharon telling me about like the work that they had done out there and stuff. And in fact, the very first day I went out there, I used to hunt in the past, and I thought, oh, I'm going out to this rural area. Let me take my shotgun and my 22 and go do some target shooting out here. I'll be out in the middle of nowhere, that kind of thing. And I was walking around the property, and it was just, you can just feel the energy of this place, right? And so I don't know, a couple hours in, I went over to my truck and I'm let me go grab my shotgun and go set up some targets. And I opened the back door. I reached in to grab my gun, and I kid you not, a voice like as loud as you and I are talking says, "You don't fire a gun here." And I went, I literally could not pick it up. I went, "Oh wow, okay." I mean, like that kind of like, oh, what's the deal here, And after I bought the property at Sharon's Memorial, there was a woman, Catherine was her name. She was an archaeologist. I can't remember exactly, but she was. I sat down with her and she started telling me the history of the basin and started telling me about the Modoc Wars and the civil and all these kind of things. And she said, "Oh, by the way, you have on your property on the National Registry is a cremation site from one of the Modocs that was cremated here, way back when." And I'm like, "Oh, okay," that kind of thing. And it's like, the I've had people from the tribe that have been out there, and I remember one guy just burst into tears. His name is Aaron, and he's like, "Glenn, I see my people here. I can see them, all the things, and the more I learned about it, it was just there's a lot of like ceremony that's been done there, a lot of healing. So it's just kind of infused the land with this energy, and it's palpable, and so um I've had to it's been an interesting relationship with it, like really trying to tune into what do you want here, what do you need here, what does the community need here, that kind of thing. And because Sharon passed before we really kind of got in, she was going to tell me a lot of the things, and so I really didn't get to hear a lot of this. So I've had to pick up pieces from people that knew them, her and Robert. And so yeah, Robert had a sweat lodge that he built out there, and what was beautiful about that is he built a handicap ramp, you saw that. And it's not a traditional sweat lodge. It's a lodge pole sweat lodge. And he built a bench seat inside there because he worked with a lot of disabled vets that would come out and do sweats. And so they could sit there and not have to be on the ground, that kind of thing. And they have this big labyrinth, and things. And so it's just a place that just is just really infused with a lot of really beautiful energy. And then, the Aerie, because of the eagles, that's the name of the, and all the big birds. And, this area is known for, the, all the Audubon societies and stuff like that would come out here. And so you got that, and you got the deer that come on the property every day. And I got all these animals just hanging around, and it's just interesting, so it's one of those, like, I've really had to kind of just tune into the place, and like, okay, what do you need, and so 5 years in, I'm getting to know it more and more,
Yeah.
and so
It's
yeah,
probably evolved and it continues to evolve.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I'm curious. You said something when you were introducing yourself about uh, I think you said electrical contracting and
yeah,
the psychology
yeah.
of that. What do you mean?
Oh, I don't know if
Or
I
did you mean the psychology of
I was studying
just,
the
okay,
psychology
gotcha.
thing, but it's interesting you say that because, you know, um, as an electrical contractor, I also did electrical engineering. We did commercial solar projects, and I did design most of our projects and things like that. And when I was doing my somatic experiencing training, um, the guy that I was studying with started talking about how trauma happens and how when a shock hits the system and how we get traumatized, like not everybody gets traumatized by the same events and things like that. But he started talking in this way about, and what he was literally drawing stuff on the whiteboard, and he was talking electrical theory. I mean, it was like all it's like, oh yeah, it's like when the system gets, it makes sense. We have these electrical impulses firing off inside of us, and how our brain works and all that stuff. And when there's too much energy on the system overloads. You go into fight, flight, freeze, and if there's too much energy, the dorsal vagal kicks in and bam, just takes you out. That's you know, you go offline,
Mhm.
he was drawing, it's like, oh, it's the same thing in electricity. When
Mm.
like circuits overload, when there's too much energy on a circuit or on a system, it either burns up or trips the breaker, and kind of stuff like, and it's like, oh, this is like physics.
Mhm.
This is why we are reacting because we are made up of nature and we are these things, and when these energies hit our system, the circuit breaker trips.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lost. Don't know which path to take, what to post. In the social media jungle, video is king. Your kids are obsessed, your customers are addicted, we're all hooked, and social media sites prioritize videos. So when you're ready to stand out from the crowd, reach out to 40 Deuce Films. Feeling over everything.
That's an interesting analogy. I wouldn't have put that together.
Yeah. So it made it a lot easier for me to understand. So it's like, oh, okay, this is what's happening,
Yeah.
So
What is, I feel like you touched on it just now with that answer, but what do you mean by somatic? What is that for those of us that
somatic
don't know?
means the body, the soma,
Mhm.
so it's, and somatic experiencing was developed by Dr. Peter Levine. And what he started noticing and studying in his patients was, um, with working with trauma, is these energies that are stored in the body. Like what we've realized is that our muscles, our cells have memory. It's not just our brain. Our body is intelligent. And um, and when traumas hit our body, if we don't learn how to dispel that energy or work with it in the moment, it gets stored in our body. And that's when traumas get laid on and affects you throughout the rest of your life, or whatever the trauma, whether it's emotional or physical or whatever kind of thing. Um, if that doesn't get healed and doesn't get released, that's what's causing diseases and the things that happens, stuff like that. And he was studying animals in the wilderness and noticed that wild animals don't get traumatized, but humans do, domesticated animals do as well. And I'm like, what? And so when I was studying, I was asking my teacher, well, if we're animals, well, why don't we process it the same way animals in the wilderness do? He goes, because we have a neocortex, we have a brain that can reason, it's self-aware and things. And so we have, one guy explained it the best. He goes, imagine you're hunter-gatherer. We're back in the caveman days, and you're hunter-gatherer, right? And you go into your cave one night and you go to sleep, and then you wake up the next morning into this environment. He goes, that's basically kind of what happened to us on our evolution. Our brain grew and matured so quickly that it really didn't keep up with the evolutionary process. And so we interrupt our own ability, instead of, like, when a trauma hits, letting that energy dispel and move through our system naturally, it gets stuck. And animals in the wilderness, like when the system gets overloaded, like let's say they're being chased by a predator. And if they get to the point where they fight or freeze, right? So they're trying to run, but if they get caught, eventually the system goes offline. The animal goes and plays dead as its last attempt at trying to survive itself. And if the predator thinks it's bad meat, or for whatever reason doesn't kill that animal, there's videos of this that you can watch. It's mind blowing, where after the predator leaves, the system starts to sense that the threat is gone. The system starts coming back online, and the animal, like, will start making movements it was making before it went into freeze. Like the legs will start moving, and the body, all of a sudden the body starts shaking, and also the animal just shakes off all this energy and then pops up and goes on its way like nothing ever happened.
Mhm.
And so it's like it's that, so it's working with the body to, because literally a lot of these traumas, it's just that, it's just energy needing to move out of the system,
Mhm.
energy that's locked up. The Hakomi work that I do, which kind of isn't, like, the somatic work is really good with, like, physical traumas, sexual traumas, things like that. But Hakomi takes it to the next level of working with what we call the core experience, or the core beliefs. It's the traumas that are laid down in childhood that we take on and make beliefs out of, you know. And so we work at kind of getting down to what was the core belief that got laid down in your childhood and in your life that caused these things, and which, because a lot of people think, well, God, there's something wrong with me and I was born this way. I said, no, 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 you weren't born this way. It's actually the brilliance of the body. Like, this is the brilliance of a human being, is that it adapts to its environment. So whatever that environment is that you're growing up, you're adapting to survive in that environment. And the problem is, as we get older, these systems that we've done to protect ourselves are no longer needed. We're adults. We can the threats are not there as much, but we're still operating as if they are. And that's why people go into relationships and have trouble with relationships and things like that. And so the Hakomi work is to start working and getting down to the core beliefs that were laid down, and working with those core beliefs, and then providing what we call the missing experience, because the brain still takes it as if things are happening now, and the brain will accept, like, what would have been the proper response in those situations, the healthy response, if the parent was there to be able to help you, or if somebody there to help move through whatever experience you're having to normalize it for you, you wouldn't have taken on these belief systems. And so we help to kind of repattern that. And what we've learned through science with neuroplasticity is that we literally can regroove new neural pathways, new belief, lays down, new belief system, new ways of thinking. We're not stagnant, and this is the beauty of us human beings. So when I'm sitting with somebody working with them, they're like blaming us, like, no, man, this is how intelligent you are. You weren't born this way, and it's like, for the first time in their life, like, it's like all those critical voices when you're watching yourself in the video, like, oh, I should have said it. It's like, my question to my clients is, whose voices are those? Whose voice is that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's mine. It's coming out of my. It's like, no, that's an externalized voice that's been internalized. That's something that you've taken from culture, from or a belief, or somebody told you were dumb or stupid or whatever it is, kind of thing, that you've internalized. So our job is to peel the onion back and start undoing that, and bringing, basically my work, the therapeutic work that I do, is basically helping people bring them back home.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to get emotional. It's bringing you back to who you were born into this world as, before all the arrows and the daggers started flying, and it's like, and we all have different levels of trauma, right? We all grew up in different environments, so there's not one's over the other, but we're also there, and the other thing too is, we always think of trauma as something bad or negative, right? No, there's an intelligence to trauma. Like, if you're born on this planet, you're not going to escape some type of bad situation, but it's like, the body actually needs stress to grow, like certain types of stress. And so it's those experiences, if you can start reframing those as, it's like, what didn't kill you makes you stronger, kind of thing. It's that kind of thing. It's like, can you look into the intelligence of what this trauma? It's when these things are occurring, it's trauma trying to heal itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's the intelligence of trauma. It's coming into your forefront of your memory. It's coming into your mind, situations that it's like, you walk down the street, you keep walking into the same hole, right? Well, why do I keep doing that? Because it's trying to heal itself. It's trying to bring it into your awareness, so that you can, it starts with awareness. Once you start to realize what it is, then you can begin to heal it, and if we pay attention to it. And so, and again, it does, it makes you a stronger person, after the fact. You'll heal a lot of people, like, they can get to a point where they look back and they're like, thank God I went through that, because it actually made me a better person. It's actually made me a stronger person for today. I can handle situations a lot more, instead of from the victim standpoint, but from a more empowered standpoint, and it's really that, like, changing the mindset of, like, I'm a victim, I'm this, I'm that. It's like, no, you just happen to be caught in the crosshairs of either someone else's trauma or some perpetrator's trauma, like their trauma. Again, perpetrators, things like that. When we talk about sexual trauma, for example, that's usually a traumatized person acting out their trauma on someone else. It's their nervous system literally trying to regulate itself. It's their trauma trying to heal itself. And unfortunately, sometimes we get caught in the crosshairs of that. And so, and that's what we're trying to bring back, is the understanding of that for people,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What does it look like to try to work through that? If somebody's never been through sessions and tried to heal that, what kinds of work goes into that?
Well, it starts with awareness,
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm working with you, I'm tracking your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use myself as an example. When I was studying somatic experiencing, the teacher brought me up to do a demo in front of the class, right? And we just started a conversation like this. And as he was talking to me, he noticed I kept tilting my head to the left. And I wasn't even conscious of it. I mean, this is, again, the intelligence of trauma. My head was like, kept kind of leaning to the left. And after a while, he just said, Jim, are you aware? Do you notice that your head is tilted to the left a little bit, so you brought awareness into it. And so I said, oh, that's interesting, and so as we started, he goes, okay, I want you to just put your awareness on that. And it was tight. In fact, I used to get migraines. Because of this trauma that we ended up healing, which was, as I kind of put my awareness on it, he says, okay, I want you to just let that movement move on its own. Like whatever your body wants to do, just let it go. And I started moving. He goes, no, slow it down. Because I was kind of just doing, he goes, no, slow it down. He goes, I want you like micro movements, just really tune in and put your awareness. And as I did that, he goes, okay. And I just let my head start doing what it wanted to do. My neck, it sounds really weird, but I'm sitting there and it starts kind of wanting to go up and up. And he goes, yeah, when it hits a resistance, just pause for a minute, back off, and then go back up to the resistance and then see if you can keep going. So what happened over probably a 5-minute time frame or whatever was my head and neck went all the way around in like a circle. And as I came and completed that movement, like the minute I completed the movement, there was this rush of energy. So like I literally felt like the pipes just got unclogged and this energy went right up through my spine, right up through my neck and out my head. And I was like, holy cow, what was that? And he's like, that's the releasing of energy. He goes, it's just energy moving. And it was when I went back, like I have a lot of trauma on the left side of my brain. I was an athlete in high school. I played baseball and basketball, and I've had like 3 concussions over here. I got hit in the head with a baseball right in the back here. That's, and then I had surgeries. I had a mastoid bone infection, and so that's this energy would get stuck there and cause migraines. All because it would literally, the energy would come up and hit this trauma point, the physical trauma point, and like it was like hitting a brick wall, because I could feel this, and it would hit it, and my head and I literally would go into migraines and get nauseous, and haven't had it ever since. Like just the completion of that movement unlocked that energy, and now that energy is moving and flowing. It's like acupuncture. You go to acupuncture, it's all about opening the meridians and things, and I know this stuff starts to sound kind of woo, but it's physics. Like at the bottom line, it's just that. It's not woo. It's just it's the physicality of being human.
No, when you this is like making sense in my head, just the idea of energy, because that's how I feel about things too. We pick up on energies from all kinds of different people. So I think that's fascinating. And I've never thought about it in terms of that.
Yeah. And so not just physical traumas, emotional traumas, sexual trauma, things that are more emotional, those same things, those are also energies that are getting locked into the system. And then our rational brain, our neocortex, kind of interrupts the natural ability to heal that, or if somebody's not there to help guide that through, kind of thing. I had a good friend, a good guy that used to work for me for years. I don't know, 20 years ago, he had his little 5-year-old girl, and we were talking somatic experience. We started telling him about all that stuff, and he was like, and he got really cool, really cool. Thought it was real. And he was out one day with his little girl. She was riding her bike, and she did the nose plant, hits the asphalt. And I told him, like, I was telling him one time, like, when children do that, the parent, that's the other thing, the parent will come in and rush in and intercept the trauma response. The parent sees a child get hurt, your natural ability, oh, let me go pick the child up. Like, let me go comfort this. And the problem is the child is like still very much connected to your nervous system, and they're reacting to your, and I said, if something like that ever happened, just come up to the child, but just don't interrupt. Just let them know that you're there, so they can feel the safety and security of their parent. But just say, okay, I'm right here with you, honey. I'm okay. You're, whatever. And this thing happens. She does this nose plant, face plant into the asphalt, and she starts crying. And he remembered what I said. So he walked over to her, and he just stayed with her. And he's like, I'm right here, and so she saw that he was there, and he didn't interrupt her natural ability to, and children are great because they don't have as many of the things in their way of blocking, their systems. They're still pretty wide open. And so he witnessed her in front of him she looked at him, and then she started doing it, and she goes, all of a sudden she just left alone. Her body started shaking and shaking all this energy off, just like you see on the videos. And all of a sudden she's like expels all the energy, and she stops and she looks at her dad and she starts laughing. She literally started laughing. She goes, I'm okay, Dad. And she pops up and he goes, Glenn, if I didn't see it in my own eyes, he goes, I wouldn't have believed it. I said, yeah, it is that simple,
Mhm.
So it's,
How do we apply that to ourselves though? Like we already have all this trauma at our age,
yeah.
right? All those things that have happened to us. So how can we train ourselves to not intercept or stop whatever our body naturally wants to do?
Well, it kind of depends on what the situation is, but mostly it's it's learning. It starts with awareness.
Mhm.
It's like learning, like, okay, I need to like learning what my body needs to do to heal itself. And so if you're not in a therapy session, or I mean, primarily that's why people come to therapy, is to heal these things, to learn these things, right, to unpack them. But if you're not, and you're out in the wilderness and you're skiing and you get hurt or something like that, if you're aware of these concepts, it's allowing your system to do its thing. It's really, it's just, that's where it is. It starts with awareness. You start to understand, okay, there's this thing that just happened. Can I let go and let my body do its thing on its own? And I've experienced this myself, where I've had something happen, and just let my body, and my body starts to move and shake, and just like your hand, like if you just let this energy dispel, with physical things. But when it comes to emotional traumas, and that's where it's, that's where what I said earlier, like as a child growing up with, some type of, say, emotional trauma, or like a sexual trauma, if there wasn't a parent around to protect that child and to help normalize that experience, you know, we grow up into adulthood, and that's where the therapist comes into,
Mhm.
and where you start to come in, and the therapist begins, kind of the therapist role is kind of the parentified person. It's the person that's going to act as how a parent should have acted in that situation, or some whatever, and to help heal that. And so that's where we begin to get into, and that's why the Hakomi part of it is we start to get into the story, the belief systems that were laid down depending on what type of trauma. With physical trauma, there's not so much of a story, it's a physical trauma. you know but with the emotional traumas and things like that, that's where it's like we begin to kind of peel back the story, because it's like, you're not the story, you're not a victim, you know, and beginning to, and sometimes it takes a long time, the, um, our systems are there trying to protect us, kind of thing. And so it's been there your whole life protecting you. And so the ego has a hard time letting go, and, letting that happen. But so, yeah, so for yourself, it just depends on what kind of trauma it is, but mostly with a guided counselor or something like that can help move that through for you.
You might ask yourself, when is the best time to start saving for retirement? The answer is simple. It's today. Dan Hernandez, your Klamath Falls Edward Jones financial advisor, is here to help. He will work with you to help build a plan for your ideal retirement by identifying your unique goals and help you keep on track to achieve them. The sooner you get started, the better. Call Dan Hernandez at 541-273-7132 to schedule an appointment today. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
I know you work with lots of different people, but you do work a lot with men
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
do some men's retreats and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Uh, I think there's still a lot of stigma
Oh yeah.
in our community,
Big
in our world,
in our world.
about therapy.
Yep.
And I think my belief is that it's even harder for men.
Big
Have you
time.
found that?
Oh, big time. Big
Hmm.
time. And it's funny you say that, because, coming from the Bay Area, it's a lot more widely accepted. I mean, every walk of life is in the Bay Area. Whatever you want to get into, it's there, right? But moving to a rural setting, you don't really have that kind of thing. And there's a lot of, you know, it is that, and it's interesting. My wife's, we have a free monthly men's group every month, and my wife has a free monthly women's group and she has twice as many women at her group that I do every month. The women here, the women somehow have a more natural ability, to feel, to have emotions, things like that. But it's not that men don't have that capability. It's literally kind of been programmed out of us, to be strong, especially in this country where they're very individualistic, like we don't need anybody. We could do it on our own, pull your bootstraps, that kind of thing. That's fine when you're trying to build a business or whatever kind of thing, but the community aspect is huge, you'll see there's a lot of focus on kind of looking back at the tribal systems, indigenous systems, cultures where, to this day, you go to India, you go to Israel, you go to these different, Armenia, where my wife is from, they are much more tribal. They're much more like, it's not uncommon for 3 generations of families to be living in the same household, and that's the community. That's the support that we get from community, but like I said, here in the United States, we're very, very individualistic. And for men, it's even more so. Women are let off the hook a little bit, because of our belief systems around what we think is masculine and feminine kind of thing. And so it is. And so men look at it as a weakness. They look at it, but it's not. It's actually what's going to save your marriage. It's what's going to make you a stronger person. If you can get past this thing like, oh, I'm just being a baby here and I'm thinking about this and I'm talking about this, kind of thing or whatever, but the men that do start to lean in have dramatic shifts in their relationships, and I'm not going to be, a lot of the men that show up for me are like, my wife made me come here, that kind of thing, and so it's like, no, I get it, and then we'll sit around and we just, like, my men's groups operate a lot different than my wife's groups. She's much more, she does kind of almost little mini workshops with them and things like that. But for me, it's mostly about men just being able to like just sit and share their experiences, and it's huge because that's that communal aspect. All of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one dealing with this, and you're hearing the same story from other men and what they're dealing with and all that. And so there's a community that can get there. And it's not about sitting and wallowing in your story and it's not about that at all. Mm-hmm. It's really about, we need each other, like we are mammals. Mm-hmm. We are biologically meant to be in society, in community with each other. Yeah. And we've gotten so far away from that, to the point where, there's a book called, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And it's a men's group by a guy named Michael Mead that wrote it years ago. He was kind of like an OG of the men's work back in the 30, 40 years ago. It talks about what we call adolescent masculinity versus healthy masculinity. And most of us men are operating from adolescent masculinity, and we haven't been taught, we haven't had good mentors, and you can, a lot of it can be traced back to like the start of the Industrial Revolution when, and here, what's nice about Klamath is there's still farms, there's agricultural. So a lot of the boys are still out there working in the farms with their fathers. And that's kind of how it used to be. The boys growing up were much more connected with their fathers every day. They were out in the fields working with them and getting this mentoring from their fathers, And then when the Industrial Revolution kicked in, men were being taken off the farms and into factories, into the cities and all that stuff. And they were no longer. And so the boys were now being raised by the mother primarily, And there's a really good book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. that I have. It's like required reading for my guys, because I'll sit in a men's group, and I'll sit there and they're talking about how frustrated they are with their wife. Their wife is, I can never do anything right, no matter what I do. And I kind of say, I go, let me ask you a question. What do you say when your wife says, where do you want to go to dinner? And without hesitation, I don't know, where do you want to go? I go, yeah. I go, that's like nails on a chalkboard to a woman. You're shaking your head. It's like, because you are like, I need you to lead. Like, mm-hmm. I need you to make the decision. I said, it's that kind of stuff. Right. And that's because we were, over the last 150 years, a lot of us were mostly raised by our moms, and it's all done unconsciously. So the mom, now you become kind of a surrogate husband, so to speak. And the little boy is, I'll do anything to make mom happy kind of thing. Like, what does mom need? And there's this, it's, kind of an unhealthy relationship that gets going, but the masculine mentoring isn't available. And the mother is trying her best to fill both roles, but it's just impossible, And so Norm, Mr. Nice Guy talks about that, about how to get healthy mentoring and how to, and teaches a lot. David Data is another one that talks a lot about that. Like he is a great story where husband went to work, and that morning the wife says, "Hey, could you pick up some milk on the way home?" And on the way home, he stopped. He bought a lottery ticket, and turns out his lottery ticket wins, and he comes home, "We're millionaires! I just won the lottery!" And it's all exciting. And the wife goes, "Yeah, but did you pick up the milk?"
Right.
It's that kind of stuff, but
awesome.
those are the funny things about, but yeah, so men are just not, they haven't been taught how to be with their feelings and think that it's something less than, that they're weak, and it's actually more of the healthy man that can be with that.
Sure.
That's where they find their spine. That's where they find their like learning to heal, that learning to be what's called health, the healthy masculine that has a balance, and so that we're not acting out and doing stupid things, so
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, I see it a lot here because it's pretty old school here, and like I said, in the Bay Area, men's groups are full, kind of thing, um it's but the women here are the leaders, man. I mean, I've watched it big time, you know they're a lot more awake, a lot more aware. It's not to say that the men aren't, it's just, it's, we just haven't been taught,
Right.
And so yeah, so that's kind of the work I do. That's why I work so much with men, and I work with women too, but my primary work is with men and a lot of men's groups and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and I will put in the description, I'll put some of the information about how to reach you and that kind of thing. There's so much more I want to ask. We are towards the end of our time.
Oh.
That went fast.
Yeah, I wanted to do a little plug for the area and and stuff like that. I don't know if there's time for that.
Yeah, what do you tell us a little bit about the Aerie?
Yeah, well, what we're doing, we're actually, after being here 5 years, really starting to, as I've gotten involved with the chamber and leadership Klamath and getting a lot more involved in what the community needs, and so we're in the process of kind of, pivoting and things, um, and learning into what, and so one of the things we're doing is building an amphitheater so that we can start having weddings out there. We're kind of pivoting into more of like making it, a place, Robert and Sharon used to do weddings out there, but they couldn't really hold much. And so, yeah, we're going to be probably in the spring and summer, we're getting to the point where we can have weddings. We started doing research, and really, other than if you go out to the Running Y or whatever, there's not a lot of places, and so we're bringing that on board, with that. Natalie's been reaching out to a lot of yoga studios to come do retreats and different things, and opening it to the community for corporate events, people that want to do team building events or whatever they want to do, they come out and use this place for that. And we're on 30 acres, and you've seen it. We have the Healing House, the retreat center itself, is a 2,000 square foot retreat center that has a full kitchen downstairs and jacuzzi and sauna and showers and all that kind of stuff. And then upstairs is the workspace, stuff. And so, yeah, really wanting it to make more availability to the community. I'll still do my therapy work and all that, but it's not that's stuff I do on its own. But and we'll still have men's groups and things, all that. So it's, but really wanting it to make it more available to the community of what they need. And because our overhead's low, we can do a lot of things a lot cheaper than other people. So,
Yeah.
but so we're starting to kind of rebrand,
Well, that'll be interesting to watch how that evolves. And I think it's neat that you've become part of the community and then started to identify some of the needs that are here. I think that's on multiple levels.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because we're wanting to make this, because we know there's we don't want the stigma that, oh, this is where we go to do therapy work or healing work or whatever kind of thing. Like, no, this is much more bigger than that. So
yeah. Well, we'll look forward to seeing how that goes. Maybe a year from now, we bring you back on and we can talk about some of those changes.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Just to wrap up, I'm going to ask you a couple questions that I kind of ask everybody.
Okay.
If I gave you $250,000 to do something today to make a difference in our community, what would you do with it?
Well, I'd start with finishing out the improvements at the Aerie, the amphitheater and some of the other accommodations that need to be built out in addition to what we've already done. Probably a lot of it is putting it back into the business, and how I can make it more. I mean, it's that how can I make this more uh, fit the needs of the community? You know, the bottom line. What does the community need, and how can I fill that? You know, so that money would go towards that, so that it would make it um, more accessible. You know,
Yeah.
price wise, everything. You know, so people can actually afford to do stuff and not have to pay through the nose and things. And you know, so it's just a reinvestment in what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, to make it more available.
Great.
Yeah.
Tell me about one of your role models. Do you
Tell
have
me
a
about what?
Do you have a role model?
Yeah, yeah. I have a
Tell me about
few,
that.
but my main one is my dad.
Hmm.
Now I'm gonna get emotional again. Yeah, he was an incredible human being. Incredible human. He was one who taught me when I work with my clients, guys, and they're having struggles in their relationships. One of the questions I'll ask him is she your queen or not? And that's where I got that from. Was my dad, like how he treated my mom. I think he thought he married above his pay grade, you know, kind of thing. And he was a leader in the community, in the church. You know, I grew up Mormon, and he was one of the leaders of the whole Orange County area. Highly respected, but very, very humble, very centered, grounded man. You know, and that's where a lot of it. I got really lucky to have him as a dad, but I didn't really get that relationship till I was around 16, because we was off doing church work all the time, and he was gone all day, kind of like taken out of the home again.
Hmm.
But he had a heart condition that had him go on long-term disability, and he was home. And I got to spend several years just really getting to know him better and connecting with him, you know. And so, yeah, he's my main role model and mentor, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
He sounds incredible.
He's passed, but yeah,
Nice.
yeah. He's the kind of guy that when he walks in the room, people kind of there's an aura about him, you know, and there's an attract, and he's very, and he loved people. He was just loved people, you know.
Mhm.
It's like, you know, a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet, kind of thing. And he really would take an interest in who you are and what you are and that kind of thing, and that's what people loved about him, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's cool.
Hmm.
If you were planning, let's say somebody came from out of town to Klamath first time and you're planning like your perfect Klamath day, what would it be?
Um, what would it be? Well, I would take them down to Thai Orchid and have some of the best Thai food around. Probably take them out up to Crater Lake and show them that, you know, out to the lava beds, onto my property, you know, and yeah, I think I would take them out into the nature that's here, you know. Um, yeah, I mean, that's one thing about the Pacific Northwest and up here in Klamath, like it's just incredible geography and nature. And so I would get them out there and that kind of stuff. And then if there was something cool going on at the Raglan, I'd probably take them there. You know?
That's a good idea. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for this. And thank you to our producer, 40 Deuce Films.